You're listening to Vet Synapse, a podcast connecting the world of research, innovation, and practical help to the veterinary profession. I'm your host, Dr. Philip Judge from Vet Education. Let's get connected with Vet Synapse. Welcome everybody to another episode of Vet Synapse. I'm Philip from Vet Education, your host for this podcast. We are joined today by Dr. Sonja Olson, and she is the author of an absolutely wonderful book called Creating Wellbeing and Building Resilience in the Veterinary Profession, A Call to Life. We are up to the second part of chapter 3 in this book. For those of you who are listening to this podcast for the first time, we have actually done the first 2.5 chapters of this wonderful book, walking through its contents. One of the things I really like about this book is it's not a book of problems, it's a book of solutions and action. The call to life is the biggest part of the title in my book. But in chapter 3, we are identifying a few things, a few challenges that we have as veterinary professionals. In the last episode, we talked about our professional identity and professional development from the classroom to novice professional and how we develop as professionals. And we finished off talking about specific workplace concerns that various areas of veterinary practice actually have. Today, we're going to delve into some of the challenges we all face as veterinary professionals. And there is, to be honest, quite a list. But let's start with collegial relationships and communication. What are some of the challenges here? I should just backtrack a tiny bit and welcome you, Sonja, to the podcast today. Let's just talk about some of these collegial relationships and communication and what are some of the challenges that we have?
Oh, I love it. And I'm so glad to be with you, Philip. And yeah, here we are talking about communication and slowing things down enough to really connect with the fellow humans that are around us. Well, and that's the crux of it, isn't it? I mean, when we look at the world, it has always been so that, when it comes to conflict or misunderstanding or misalignment, so many times it's a result of us not making the time and recognizing the value of that time to really get to understand what's at the crux of this, what's underneath the words, and meet the human as much as the animal in terms of their needs for care to be heard. So whenever we find ourselves or another human reacting in a bigger emotional way than we would expect, many times it's because we're not meeting a need. That's just true. That's like communications 101. We're not meeting a need of theirs. And usually the most important need is they don't feel heard. So when it comes to today's world, where everything is so fast and communication comes in all the forms that it does, it behooves us to remember humans are humans. And we have certain ways of meeting our environment. And when emotions get entangled, as they do with the work that we are doing for their little furry beasts, that we need to be mindful of the flow of communication, written, spoken, text, telephone, the whole of it.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned text and the way even things are written in communication to clients, for example, and to our colleagues in perhaps letters between one veterinary practice and another veterinary practice, how, yes, we are dealing with the facts of a patient, but even just the few words to say thank you so much for your email at the start of a reply can be a huge thing. When we're replying to somebody's email, it breaks the ice a tiny bit. It acknowledges that somebody's taken an effort to try to communicate with you. So that's one thing I wanted to bring to that. And the second thing I did want to mention is, yes, when you're talking to colleagues even within your practice as well, just being mindful and aware of how we communicate to our colleagues and how we are responding to them in a particular situation, maybe a case that hasn't gone all that well. Maybe they're asking for help, and how we respond to that person can have a huge impact on how the conversation goes and how that person feels at the end of it.
There's, in conflict management, there's 3 different types of listening that I love to bring up around this. The first is listening to win. So where you already have a set idea of what it is that you believe is right and what, or the way that things should go. And this isn't just at work, right? This is life. So it might be though that with a nurse comes to you while you're in the midst of typing up a record, you've got estimates, you've got so many things demanding your attention, and that nurse is trying to share something with you important about a case or a diagnostic finding, and you're barely even giving them your body presence. You're still turned towards your keyboard, and they're sharing something important. And your win in that is that I've got my agenda. My time is more important than anything you have to say to me. It happens all the time. Same thing, the client experiences that as well, right? So it happens to us as, as the roles that we have in our lives. We know what that feels like. And yet we do that when we get, quote unquote, very busy. Then there's the listening to fix. We can't help ourselves. We are trained as medical practitioners to fix. So just give yourself some compassion and a bit of a break around that and be on the lookout for it. Because sometimes that's not at all what's desired. Sometimes it's looking for collaboration. Maybe they're just wanting to be heard. Maybe they are looking for advice, coaching, and maybe a fix, but those are different. Advice, coaching, and fixing are different. But I want to invite folks to mindful listening, listening with attention and focus of really what is going on here. Am I hearing you accurately? And making yourself present and paying attention. It does take a moment, but boy, does it keep things efficient when you hear it right the first time and you don't interrupt.
Absolutely. And I think that's got huge spin-offs when we're talking to clients about extracting a history, not even extracting a history, listening to the reasons why a client has brought their animal into which, and they'll often give you lots of history in that initial conversation before sometimes you and I will take on and ask more directed questions so we complete the picture, if you like. But we'll talk about technology in a little bit as our chat goes on today, but I find that the presence of computers and keyboards, a lot of times the screens are facing away from the client and the client is giving us a history. And I've seen veterinarians turn with their backs to the client, typing the history and turning around a little bit for a couple of seconds. I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm a person who gets a piece of paper and a pen, and I sit down with the chair at the same level as the client, and the client's usually sitting on a stool, and I'm sitting at the same level as them, and I'm sitting there and say, "Tell me about Fluffy. Tell me about whoever that brought in, and what's he been up to?" And I'm looking at their dog. The dog walks up to me. I'll pause and I'll pat the dog and say, "Hello, how are you?" sort of thing, and the same with cats. But I think that physical posture actually helps establish a rapport with your clients. It helps them understand that you are actively listening to them rather than listening to win, listening to problem solve, listening. You're actually just listening for listening's sake to, and yes, we have an agenda in our mind. We're getting information from the client and they've got a lot of valuable information, but I think that's super important.
And I'm curious, if we pay attention to our nonverbals and to the fact that, oh, by the way, we are primates who are come with a certain operating system, such as mirror neurons and the ability to attune to each other's emotions and energy. That's real. And it's kept us alive. It's part of our old survival techniques to know who's safe and who's not safe in our world and community. And we can use this for the good, where we really tune into how can I show this individual that I'm listening, that I'm present for them? Because I'll tell you, if you're trying to earn trust and you're trying to build a bridge towards working through challenging conversations around illness or money or whatever it may be with their pet, they need to know you care. And they need to know you care about them as well as about the pet. And I know that sounds sort of intuitive, but what is the signal that you're giving them? So just be thinking about what is it that I'm really saying with my body, with my face. I don't know about you, Philip, but how many times have you had to mental note to self, fix my face? Fix my face.
Yes.
Sometimes there's stuff that happens there that you're like, ooh, wait, that's unskillful.
Yeah,
So I think,
lots
right?
of really good memes out on the internet with that particular thing as well, because we are faced with some pretty interesting conversations sometimes with our clients.
That we are. Fix my face. So I think that this is just skillful human interaction. And when it comes to really building trust, building rapport, this is the human animal bond. This is the ability for us to do good quality medicine. And quite truthfully, this is the survival and thriving of our veterinary profession. We need to take care of the human at the other end of the carrier in the leash as much as the animals.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to talk now about scheduling, because in veterinary life, we have this tendency to want to see everybody, fix every animal. Clients will phone up saying, I've got this problem. We don't want to leave that animal unattended. We've squeezed them in. A lot of vet practices are extremely busy, and COVID the last few years, led to a massive increase in pet ownership. Every vet practice owner and colleague that I have spoken with has said they're absolutely run off their feet. But scheduling can be an issue for a lot of people. Can you sort of talk us through a little bit about some of the challenges and things that work for some people, don't work for other people?
So I'd like to say that this is actually, I think, an area that we have improved in many ways. I think that COVID forced us to look at a novel approach to communication and to the way that we met the needs of the pet owning community. In that gave us the chance to maybe lean into telecommunications, to using the phone as opposed to in-person communication. There's lots of different ways that we've learned how to do it. There's new technology that's available to us, veterinary-centric technology that's useful. What's cool about that is that we could also, and it is happening, utilize more of our team so that we're using our para-staff a lot more effectively and efficiently, developing them with communication skills, with emotional awareness, with self-care strategies for themselves when they get flustered. So if we prepare them for those things, they are part of the team. They are part of the solution. They can attend to those clients in terms of answering questions, relaying updates, whether it's a prescription refill. There's a lot of things that our teammates can handle more effectively, so the doctors can do the doctoring, the veterinary nurses can do more of their nursing, et cetera. So I think we're getting, truthfully, more strategic about how we use technology, how we use our team, and so that each teammate is really being upskilled to the top of their role. Really effective. I think when it comes to emergency medicine, I think we're also really being thoughtful about how to team more effectively between our general practitioners and our emergency clinics and urgent care. Specialty and referral is still present, although those relationships are evolving, aren't they, Philip?
They sure are. I'm tempted in my mind to always go back to when I worked in general practice, and we'd have oftentimes a fully packed grid of consults. There'd be 4-hour consult blocks, 2 of them in a day, and we'd fit surgeries in between those 4-hour consult blocks. And any additional patient that arrived in our practice pretty much threw that schedule out the window. And I personally found that really, really stressful. And rather ironically, when I worked out in my life what I really loved about veterinary science, it was emergency medicine. And in emergency medicine, the appointment schedule is thrown out the window, right? You don't really have appointments in emergency. There's something sick, it comes in, and yes, they're triaged when they get into hospital. But you're right with the whole triage of patients, the managing of client expectations about when they're going to be seen as well. Team communication, making the most of the nurses and technicians you have in your practice, and receptionists as well, as conduits for relaying conversations to clients who may be waiting a little while, clients whose animals are in the treatment area who may be a little anxious and stressed as well. All of that kind of thing can really help improve workflow in the practice, but also reduce the anxiety and stress that is associated with that. Scheduling, clients waiting, managing expectations really, really helps.
That managing expectations is key. I mean, Phil, that is the essential bit there, because if there's more that we can do prior to them coming in, especially if it's a stable patient, so getting the history, giving them education, giving them resources, and preparing them for the flow of the visit ahead of time, and being able to communicate with them in real time through text. It is really just what they're asking, is to be respected for their time as well, but they also want to be informed and kept in the loop when it comes to what's going on with my pet. So managing expectations, and that includes cost, that we can also give them a heads up with some of the expenses that might be coming their way without freaking them out. But I think that that's another part of managing expectations that would behoove us, because it would decrease our team's stress when it comes to having to talk about money.
Absolutely. And there's, if you're faced with a confronting thing, and then for some people it may be the anticipated cost of what the treatment for their pet may be, if you're actually able to have several minutes to digest and cope with that before you react face to face with a person, can sometimes be really, really helpful. To say, here's a sheet to read about GDV, whatever it happens to be, for that person. I'm always mindful of the fact that in order to engage your cerebral cortex, we really should be, in times of stress, we really need to be counting backwards from 10. Sometimes in a foreign language, we can count backwards from 10 too quickly. And in order to be able to more rationally approach an answer to something that we find a little bit anxious and stressful. That kind of brings me to talking about technology. We've talked a little bit about that already, and the development of technology. And there's been an explosion of new technology in veterinary practices in the last probably 20 to 30 years, from the onset of the very first, veterinary customer relation management systems, now to having everything automated sheets, treatment sheets, and those sorts of things in our clinics. How has that impacted us as veterinarians, do you think?
I think that there's been pros and cons, just like to everything else. I mean, I think that the pros certainly is that there are fewer medical mistakes made when it's not humans doing the transcription, when there are alerts that pop up on those sheets that, oh, are you sure you want this dose and you want it this route? So I think that those systems like SmartFlow and Instinct, as an example of two very well utilized platforms that use treatment sheets. They also generate estimates and invoices. They can bring diagnostics into the file. Depends on your operating system, your software, of course, as far as what you can use. But I think that there's a lot there for us to grab hold of to streamline what was a lot of manual tasks and cognitive load. So I feel like that's a huge thing for us. Cognitive load, we only have so much. We're batteries. So that we need to think then about, all right, what can this help me with? And where do I really need to be active, present, and available? So we can't unplug ourselves from the process. We need to be there to oversee and make sure that things are in fact in alignment. I think that when it comes to, we certainly know with AI coming, that's its own separate conversation. But things have changed so much since I wrote the book, Philip, compared to where we are today. The tools that we have now around transcription of medical records. Holy cow, that is so huge for every vet segment. Being able to not have to spend hours after your shift typing up medical records. So much is going on around getting those medical records done quickly with transcription that is for us, around communication to the clients, to other veterinary clinics. They're streamlining between those that didn't exist years ago. All of that is amazing. And it decreases our exhaustion. It allows us to have more energy end of day for ourselves and for our lives, our families, our pets. The side of technology that is tricky, AI, we don't know yet, right? We're in the midst of having a big conversation about privacy and ethics and all of that everywhere. That's not just at work. But the technology piece that I do think that has changed, and not for the better for us necessarily, though we are more aware of it, is around social media.
Yeah. And actually that brings me to what I wanted to talk about next, because we've talked a bit about relationships before, with professional relationships within our vet practice and with clients. And I guess something that we've only touched on briefly is this social media and the impact that it has on veterinarians as well as veterinary businesses and places of employment if you're an employee. Can you talk a little bit to that in a little bit more detail, perhaps?
Sure. I mean, it's been a boon and a real pain, and literally a pain. Cyberbullying is a significant concern. Slander, professional slander, the distress that that causes individuals to the point where people quit, people leave the profession. They are driven towards mental health crises. It's really quite ugly. So that can happen even in the professional realm. And that's something that now we are, as a community, recognizing all the resources that we need to have in place to take down really negative posts, to have a strategy ahead of time so that if something goes into the public's sphere, that there's a strategy in place. That's really smart for teams to be thinking proactively, because people, when they're angry and when they're grieving, they're not very nice. They can do some things and they do harm without thinking of the consequences. And social media is a pipeline, unfortunately, that where a lot of that happens. It can be for the good in terms of really promoting and sharing all the wonderful things that we do in veterinary medicine, highlighting the wins, the community connections that we have, so that people know more about us and what we do. So we have to dilute the negative nannies with a lot of really positive, informed, and accurate content so that we can turn the volume knob down on the people who are clearly in a space of disruption. And people can have that as perspective. They're like, oh, I can see this person is struggling, because I know from all the other posts that this is this clinic, this or this people, etc.
Absolutely, I think you raise a really good point there, and that the narrative that comes from the veterinary practice, if it is evidence-based, informative, positive, and not every case goes all that well, so actually highlighting some of even the challenges that can occur, client feedback from the majority of clients who are going to be very, very supportive of the vet practice, those negative comments tend to become outliers, and they are recognized, I think, by the vast majority of people as being an aberration and not the norm, which can help, I guess, introduce a really healthy balance, if it's an employee or a person within the veterinary practice who is being complained about in that post.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that it's a matter of, again, this is a new era of technological savviness, and it needs every teammate to be paying attention, to be informed, and to know what the team strategy is and what to do when. It's like preparing for a natural disaster or for a fire. It can be that hurtful. It can be that traumatizing that we should be thinking about it that way. What do we do when? Not if, when. It happens, this is our team response. That's important.
That's great. And we'll talk about some of the resources and things that are available a bit later on in the podcast. But you mentioned before about telemedicine, and obviously it's something related to tech. How do you feel that that's impacted us as veterinarians in both helping to solve some of our problems and also some of the challenges that introduces to our management of patients and clients?
And I think that when we began before COVID, I think that we may have had a different thing to say about this and a different feeling about it. I know I can speak for myself that is so. And having talked to colleagues before, during, after, we've moved quite a bit into the direction of this being for the good. Does it impact your relationship with your client? It has the potential to do that. So we need to be thoughtful about that and making sure that that client still feels seen and heard, even when it's through a device. But think about where we are today these days, Philip, with regards to our devices. Okay. And to us, it is a conduit to another human in a way that it wasn't even just a few years ago. There is the ability to FaceTime. So, for example, if you need to FaceTime with a client or you need to give them a patient update and you show them, here's your pet, this is post-op, look how well we're doing. So that you can use the phone in many different ways, also to communicate diagnostic results without having it to be a phone call. It can be that this is the way that we also provide medical records, all sorts of things that they can then have filed away There are the different apps that have developed to do that. So the client has it, and it can expedite then getting the information to other veterinary professionals. For an example, if they have to visit the ER. So there's spaces and places we have to pay attention to that can be a bit of a slippery slope if we aren't paying attention to communication. And I think for the most part, the technology is only getting better to help support us in the work that we do.
Agreed. And I think with a lot of the way a lot of telemedicine is conducted, there's very, very good record keeping of the conversations, whereas previously that was not a thing. We'd have a telephone conversation with a client, and the information that may have subsequently been relayed from a client to another veterinary professional may have been very different to the conversation that occurred, because there's always two ways of interpreting a conversation. The reality is oftentimes sits in the middle somewhere, sometimes skewed more to one side than the other. But yeah, I think that the technology is moving in a really exciting way in regards to that. I'm really interested to have heard your response there as well. And it certainly seems to be the thing that is happening in our profession. So I think we've got a good place where we're heading to in that, at least for the time being. I want to talk now about financial concerns, because this is another one of these challenges that we face. Now, it's something that can affect us to an enormous degree as veterinary professionals. Oftentimes, veterinary professionals, especially young veterinary professionals, because they can have huge amounts of debt that they are servicing. They're on a relatively modest income compared to a lot of other professionals that graduate. And I consider our colleagues in human medicine, for example, tradespeople, people who are in trades, builders, painters. They oftentimes have incomes many times higher than veterinarians do. So we're in a fairly modest income bracket, but we oftentimes have this enormous debt that we carry around with us for several years after graduation. But we know also that financial concerns affect our clients as well. They can affect the veterinary practice. Veterinary practice that's just started may carry a significant amount of debt for a while. We also know that there are massive overheads in veterinary practices, things that we need to look after every day in terms of the equipment and the staffing levels and those sorts of things. Can you just tell us a little bit more about some of your concerns, or the concerns that we as professionals have around the sort of whole area of finance?
I mean, clearly this could be its own seminar, right? I mean, we know that there are entire courses on this because it's fraught. There's a lot here, Philip. And I guess that the highlights, if I were today, as of 2024, what's on my mind and my heart around finances, we've made enormous strides with regards to paying our veterinary professionals in much more fair, appreciative ways, because they're demanding it. And because the resources have gotten so lean, because folks have left. So the folks that remain are asking to be paid well, or I'm out. It's reasonable and it's needed. And there needs to be a balance, because one of the things you just mentioned is as we know, for our business, one of the biggest costs for any business is the cost of your people and your staffing. So how do you find the balance between meeting your human resources needs and really honoring your team and helping them to feel wanted and appreciated, and not kick up your prices on what you're doing to the point where it's painful and then inaccessible for the pet owning community? This is the dance. This is the dance everywhere that I am hearing. More so in small animal, I'm hearing it than in mixed animal or in large animal. Academia is a little bit of a different beast compared to private practice. They have different resources and monies available than private practices do. Still, though, this points to this is something that we as a community really need to give some attention to and think through. And it goes back to, as you say, also, what are we doing with regards to supporting the educational process? And so folks don't come in with such a degree of debt that they're panicked about what they're getting paid, where they are maybe opting to choose a certain job, or they're not choosing to go on additional training paths because they feel the pressure of earning money now at a certain level. That makes me very sad, and it's not good news for us in the long term. We need people to continue to train. We need to support them in that. We need people to feel like they can choose the jobs that fit them, or your burnout cycle is just going to be perpetuated. Vet nurses, very much the same. It's really the same. They have huge amounts of financial burdens, and they don't get paid as much as the clinicians do, which isn't much either. So I know plenty of veterinary nurses that have more than one job in order to make ends meet. That's not sustainable.
No, and they also need career progression as well, because there are a lot of very, very smart people in those roles in a veterinary practice who can do amazing things within the veterinary practice, and we need to be able to reward those people for the skills and the value that they bring to the veterinary practice, don't we?
We do. So here comes, this, let's time to do problem solving. We're good at this. We are problem solvers, and it's deeply complex. So it's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of different perspectives and, shocker, looking for wisdom outside of our veterinary community. What? Yes. So taking what's called a multidisciplinary approach to find some solutions around what are some of the funding techniques for schooling? What are some of the funding techniques to help support our pet owning community when they are in a state of having limited financial means? So creating spaces there as well. So, and just a segue to the client space and the financial space of managing expectations and providing care at wherever they are, that spectrum of care conversation that we're in now is fairly new. It actually has a name. So many veterinary organizations around the world are really paying attention to access to care and how do we meet the humans and the animals where we can within that family's value system, cultural beliefs, and financial means. Really important conversation.
Absolutely. The whole concept of spectrum of care, I think, is so important when you're talking to clients, because clearly the cost of veterinary care can be quite expensive at one end of that spectrum of care, and can be considerably more affordable for more people at the lower end of that spectrum. But we can still care for those animals very, very well, I think, in across a pretty wide spectrum.
This is the space that we're kind of in a learning and evolving alongside organizations such as the Human Animal Bond Research Institute, who's been doing a lot of work around what is it that the humans are needing? How much money are they spending? Where are they spending it? Can we bring that revenue back into our veterinary practices? That requires relationship building. So we're all the way back to our first conversation of this podcast, which is, oh, they need to know we care. So they keep, right? And that's the piece of it that I think we are in the midst of discovering. I'm excited that the conversation is occurring and there are more resources coming to life that we'll be able to share with each other so people don't have to start from ground zero.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about something now that you discuss in this chapter called trauma-informed care, because it's related to the fact that we deal with trauma nearly every day in practice, both in some unfortunate circumstances, physical trauma delivered to us by the animal. Hopefully that doesn't occur that often, but there is certainly a degree of psychological trauma as well that can be associated with difficult interactions, challenging interactions with clients, maybe euthanasia, those types of things as well. Tell us a little bit about what this trauma-informed care actually is.
Yeah, and again, this is a really deep and rich topic that I invite our listeners to get curious about and do some additional reading. It comes to us from the human medical realm, and there's more layers to this in vet med than in human medicine around what we experience called secondary traumatic stress. It occurs in human medicine realms as well, in other fields such as social work or even in environmental work. Any place where you are caring for living systems and beings, there is the potential for what's called secondary traumatic stress, which means vicarious trauma. It's not your trauma, but you are hearing it, you are seeing it, you are absorbing the impact of it as if it were yours. Think about every single day in the veterinary clinic environment. Again, it doesn't matter what segment you're in. We are hearing, we are seeing, we are witnessing all sorts of big emotions, things that are happening to the clients, things that are happening to the pets, and things that are happening with our colleagues. And by the way, every human comes with small t, big T trauma already existing in their lives or going on at that time. We are one of, in the world, considered to be one of the most trauma-soaked professions for that reason. So what is trauma informed? It means recognizing all of that is happening, giving a name to it, being conscientious and creating strategies for yourself, for your team to notice it, work through it, mitigate it. And guess what? Our clients are humans. They're going through stuff too. So how do we help them? We look at the way we communicate, written, as well as what we're saying, how we show up, what we believe, checking our biases and our filters about what's going on over there. No human is their emotions. They are experiencing that emotion. That is not an angry client. That is a client that is scared. They're upset. They're feeling helpless, and they're experiencing waves of anger. And it's showing up in really unskillful ways and impacting us. So having a trauma-informed approach means we recognize that there's trauma out there in us and in others, and we're holding space for it in a really thoughtful, compassionate way. It takes practice, and it takes some real training, I think, around that. So that's new for us.
Excellent. I really love the way that you explained that. I think it brings together a lot of stuff that we've talked about in the previous chapters as well, right? Going back to chapter 1, and it really, I guess, kind of informs us to be a little bit more aware of everything that's going on around us and building that into how we approach the situations we're in. That kind of segues nicely into who we are and the traits that we have as professionals, because we've covered a lot of stressors and concerns related to our profession, but are there any things about you and I as veterinary professionals, and all of us as veterinary professionals, that can amplify these concerns, make them a little bit worse, I guess, for want of a better word, makes them more exaggerated, makes us more sensitive as human beings to the things that go on around us?
Oh, yes, Philip. There is a list. There's quite a bit of research on this around veterinary professionals, nurses, front desk staff, the clinicians that feel called to this profession. There are certain traits about us. We are, for the most part, we're a very introverted community. We are highly sensitive and empathic. Most of us are, to varying degrees. We have high achieving tendencies. We didn't get here by accident. We're very determined and smart. And so it calls us to achieve. And with high achieving individuals, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm sure there's most of the folks that are listening and going, oh, I feel so seen. So yes, it matters to us to do well, because we were trained to do that, because our competitive nature of going into veterinary medicine has basically selected for that. So we need to be aware that there are adaptive and maladaptive parts of perfectionism. Please calculate your CRIs accurately and pay attention. Please do pay attention to the quality of care that you're providing. Those are good places. Pay attention to the quality of communication that you're offering to your colleague or to that client. Those are good places to pay attention. Perfect? Not necessarily best as you can. Yes, because you're paying attention. We know what we know now. Do the best you can with what you know right now. And know that when we go into maladaptive spaces, it can slow you down. If you are afraid of being wrong, of not belonging, those are all the imposter syndrome flavors that show up, you're not going to try, you're not going to grow, you're not going to really embrace your most creative self. And what a shame. So those are some of the flavors. Shall I continue?
By all means, the point that you just mentioned about people perhaps being afraid to extend themselves a little bit, that can be impacted quite significantly by the sort of environment that people are working in as well, can't it? And not only in terms of the clients, but also the collegial environment that they're working in, how well supported they are as well. And moving from one less supportive environment to a more supportive environment can have like a night and day kind of impact on some people who had a previously really concerned approach to how they dealt with various situations, to somebody who feels somewhat liberated to be able to express themselves, to be able to try new surgical techniques, learn new things as well, and feel supported in that environment too. So that's another real key thing that can help these people.
Indeed, and you're pointing to some of the terms that are now more available and more discussed in many spheres in vet med and outside vet med: growth mindset, psychological safety, which is actually a part of the trauma-informed care approach, where people are allowed to be their human selves and aren't made wrong. They are going to suffer punitive action. They're not going to be humiliated. And in an environment where we do medicine, we must embrace asking questions. We must embrace pushing and challenging and saying, are you sure? Is this what you meant? I have a concern. If we don't feel comfortable to ask those questions, there's real uh-oh on the other end of that, and consequences that nobody really wants. We have to have mistake owning. Mistakes happen. We are a human. Being in an environment where we recognize that mistakes are part of what we do, it is human for us to err, yes, and medicine is a practice and an art. It's not perfect. And there will be things that we can learn along the way to do better and better, particularly if we own the mistakes as a team and we learn from them. Very skillful to create that space. So that's really wise. I love that you brought that up.
Awesome. Yeah. And I also always enjoy the fact that we work with biological entities, not all of whom read the textbooks as well, right?
Yeah, they're complex and they're comorbidities that we don't know about yet. I know about you, Philip, but I've been bit in the butt by things I didn't know were coming. You're like, oh, look at that. There's this issue as well. You don't know what you don't know. And when we're doing medicine, that's just the nature, literally, of the beast, that you know what's in front of you and there are things that might be coming or that you don't know yet. So it behooves us to listen to each other, to be open when somebody who is next to you, maybe they don't have the same number of years of practice. Maybe they're a nurse versus a doctor, but they have something to offer. It's worth listening. For a team with the same mission, best animal care possible.
Yeah, absolutely. The advocates for patient care will oftentimes have just an enormous amount of value to add to the treatment protocol, diagnostic thoughts about a particular patient that's not doing all that well. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, I want to finish off today by talking about some of the positive, sort of proactive things that we can do to help mitigate the effects and side effects, I guess, of some of the things that we've talked about today. I think chapter 3 kind of finishes off with a whole bunch of really nice things, resources, places we can go, things that are being developed. And I know since your book was written, there's been a whole lot more that's come into this space as well. So are you able to shed a little bit of light on some of the things that can be really helpful for us as veterinary professionals, knowing that we've got all of the challenges that we've been talking about in this episode and the previous one as well?
I think we're more connected as a global community because of technology, by the way, like we're doing right now. I think there's heaps of research, application, and learnings that are happening and that are being shared more quickly. And there's a bigger focus on our human teammates than ever. So what is true is that we have now come to understand neurobiologically that compassion fatigue is a misnomer. What we're experiencing is actually empathic distress and strain, where we're letting it into different parts of our brain. Compassion is actually the fix for empathic strain. We're able to name secondary traumatic stress, look for it, mitigate it, care for ourselves, care for our clients and each other in ways that we weren't paying attention to before. Moral distress as an issue, particularly around money, we can name it, we can talk about it, we can create strategies like spectrum of care strategies. We can have debriefing conversations around things that we find distressing, that cause us ethical dilemmas. So debriefing and huddles in effective ways. There are strategies that we can borrow from other places outside vet med to bring into not just when a crisis happens medically, but how's the team doing? Stress first aid is a wonderful space. We did a wonderful webinar on that, Philip, last year on stress first aid. And we were talking about recognizing stress is not bad. It's recognizing our relationship with stress and what becomes distress and what do we do when. So having strategies, again, as of yourself, of your teammate, of your practice, and knowing how to navigate that with more awareness and a larger, more robust toolbox, decreasing stigma, increasing compassionate, connected, informed awareness. The resources have become so much more abundant for all of us to grab hold of.
Excellent. Thank you so much for shedding some light on that. I was momentarily distracted because I wanted to talk about this little, I think it's a poem or a bit of prose at the end of the chapter called The Family Dog. And I'm going to leave that as a secret for anyone until they actually either listen to the audiobook of this wonderful book that you've written or buy the book. It's a fantastic poem. It kind of just makes me wish I was a dog because it's fantastic. And there's all kinds of things. You don't need caffeine, you get up, you're happy, you don't hold grudges. Dogs are just the most incredible creature. I just that bit of prose at the end made me smile because of just how wonderful these creatures are that you and I have the privilege of looking after every day of our lives. It's absolutely fantastic, and for all of us who have dogs in our houses, we get to share our lives with these absolutely amazing creatures.
And the cats and the birds and the reptiles and the horses and all the different creatures that we care for and have in our lives. It's Absolutely. True though. It's true. They are in the moment and they are better able to emotionally regulate and to recognize a stressor when it's there and to release it. So we have a lot to learn, as always, from our animals. Boy, are they the best teachers.
I think that's a great place to end our chat today, actually, talking about all the challenges and everything. Sonja, I want to thank you tremendously for sharing your wisdom with us and those wonderful discussion points. We are going to be talking next time with you about chapter 4 in your book, which is all about tailoring our individual toolbox for self-care and resilience development. Super looking forward to talking about that. That's really, really exciting. But thank you so much again for spending time with us today, and wish you all the very best until we have our next chat.
Hooray. And I'm looking forward to the toolbox building because, friends, it's an amazing profession. It's rich and it's hard. So let's get our tools and our strategies ready.
Thank you so much, Sonja. This has been an episode of Vet Synapse. I'm Philip from Vet Education, your host for the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vet Synapse. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. Make sure to visit our website, veteducation.com, for more great content and to experience the latest online, race-approved veterinary continuing education.